Dr. Drake 63 here. Today we're going to have the start of a series, and this series is going to be entitled Modernized AR M4 Platform versus Modernized AKM. More specifically, we're going to talk about semi-automatic versions that are still available to civilians. And we're going to look, like I said, at modernized versions, not the classic AK-47 versus M16 stuff going back 50 years almost to Vietnam and all of this kind of stuff. Not what we're interested in today. What we're interested in today is talking about where these weapons have evolved. We're going to specifically look at the AK chambered in 5.45 by 39 and the AK-74 modernized. For purposes of our discussion, for taking it apart, for shooting it in this series, we're going to look at the Arsenal SLR 104, which, depending on who you talk to, is the best or one of the best versions of the Russian AK-74 that you can get that's coming out of military production. And in terms of the AR, which shoots the 5.56 caliber, we're going to look at a modernistic version. This is a rifle that was purchased as a complete unit from Bravo Company Manufacturing. And just like its rival on the bottom, arguably the best that you can get. Some folks are gonna have Daniel Defense and some other types of versions that they're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about the evolution in terms of the M4. Besides what's happened in the world of stocks, what's happened in the world of handguards. They've gotten smaller over time. This one has what's called key mod. There are other versions. There's quads, which are a Picatinny type rail all the way around. There's M-lock. You're going to find that the M4 derivative, this one is a 14.5-inch barrel. You're going to find that the M4 derivatives today are a lot easier to accessorize, to add things to, and so forth than what you see in the AK world. However, that being said, one can do things like replace this handguard and gas tube cover, that these things can be replaced with rails as well. Now, I have not done that on this one for purposes of preference and authenticity's sake. But in this series, we're going to look at both of these rifles and we're going to talk about shootability. We're going to talk about accessorization. We are going to talk about parts availability. As of right now, if you want to go get a new Arsenal SLR 104, you're going to have a hard time doing it. And the reason for that is because they're no longer being manufactured for import. So you've got to do some looking around to try to find a used one, maybe see if someone has one they've been saving up, or whatever the case may be. When people talk about comparing an AK with an M16 or an AR in the sporter vernacular, you're going to find that they're typically talking about the AK-47 derivative shooting 7.62 by 39, and that's not what we're talking about anymore. And it hasn't been for some time outside of specialized uses. So very comparable type of cartridge, different setups, completely different operating systems. And one of the portions of this multi-part video will discuss the various breakdown of the operating systems, how it works, which I believe to be more efficient, things of that nature. So just wanted to kick off this video series briefly by looking at these two. And if you've watched my videos, you know this SLR 104 has been something that I have touted as my favorite rifle for a couple of years now. However, just in terms of lightweight, shootability, things of that nature, this recently acquired BCM, which is made more of a configuration of the Special Forces operators. I could see where that particular rifle right here could very quickly join, if not surpass, the SLR. But we're going to have to wait and see. We're going to do some various shooting tests. Just for those of you who are going to ask, I am not going to compare shooting through a red dot or an optic on one and open sights on the other. I'm actually gonna do both the same way. So we'll get into the pros and the cons of each system. I'm looking forward to it. Also, just a little disclaimer here. I'm not going to run over these things with trucks. I'm not going to put them in the mud, freeze them, torch them with flamethrowers, expose them to explosive devices, drop them from airplanes. Hopefully not drop them at all. So it's important to know this is not a torture test series. There are plenty of those out there that you can watch. We can discuss a little bit when we look at the operating systems of each, what the inherent advantages and disadvantages are when it comes to dirt entering the chamber, cleaning, how the mechanism might be affected, so forth and so on. But just a disclaimer before you invest any time, you need to know that this is not a torture test video. We're going to talk about, as I said, shootability. We're going to talk about the operating systems, and we're going to have discussions about accuracy and things like that. Now, one of the things that I mentioned is that these have similar calibers. They're basically a 22 caliber projectile. You can see that the shape is different. You got a longer and slimmer profile on the right with your AKM 74 cartridge. This is the 5.45 by 39. This particular version is what's called 7N6. Means it has a hollowed cavity and a piece of steel, which is going to wreak havoc when this comes into contact with flesh. This particular projectile is 53 grain. On your left, you're looking at 5.56. That's 75 grain. And standard military is using 62 grain. This is a little bit heavier on the left for varmint hunting. Both of these are going to achieve velocities out of the muzzle somewhere between 2,900 and 3,100 feet or thereabouts. They're both flat shooting cartridges, and they're both meant to do their damage, if you will, to enemy combatants or coyotes in the case of what I shoot at that is living. You're going to find that these are meant to tumble and destabilize, and there's a lot of evidence that shows that the Soviet takeoff on the 5.56 on the right, the 7N6 in particular, is a much more effective wound producer, and with shorter barrels as well. It does not take as much velocity to destabilize this upon impact than it does the 5.56 on the left. So you are going to have that difference. So in terms of talking about the ammo and the shooting in future segments, we are going to look at head-to-head at 100 yards, at 200 yards, shooting open sight, farther out if we can get the range time. We're going to talk about handling. We're going to talk about how easy it is to clean, how quickly you can break it down, and some of those things. So looking forward to this series. I hope to do a chapter a week. And we are going to next talk about the operating system, and that will be the next installment of this series. One thing I want to do is just honestly state as we get started with this, I do not have a winner in mind as we start this process. I'm not looking to like one over the other. I think they're both great rifles. Anybody that's fortunate enough to own either or both of these firearms, I think is a happy camper in my book, if you're a firearms enthusiast. So I'm looking forward to this little journey and seeing what we can find out together. And there might be some things that I don't expect. There may be some things that you don't expect to see. You know, hey, the AK is so much more dependable, and or the AR is so much more accurate. We'll find out. This is Dr. Drake 63 saying thank you very much for watching. I look forward to this video series, and we'll talk to you soon.